Once again, hard to know where to start. It is one of those days, one of those weeks, one of those years, I fear, where the truth becomes ever quieter amid the clamour of the contorting client journalists and sycophantic politicians, many of whom were telling you, about a month ago, that if the Prime Minister was found to have broken the law, or if any fixed penalty notices were issued, then that would definitely be a resigning issue. That would be the end. That would see them reach the end of their particular tethers and demand the Prime Minister's resignation. I think Sajid Javid said words to those effects as recently as January, that if a law has been broken, then any minister's position would become untenable. And here we are. Law has been broken. And yet somehow they are contriving to defend him. But no matter, because anybody defending Boris Johnson with even a scintilla of integrity, and listen, I understand why people who get paid to do it, do it. Of course, it's, we've all got mortgages to pay and kids to feed, and if you had been in the business of flogging the country Boris Johnson, or indeed the ludicrous Brexit that propelled him to power and is now falling apart around his ears, then you too would probably struggle to... it would damage your brand, wouldn't it? I mean, you could never trust me again. If I now turned around and said, by the way, that Brexit and that bloke that I told you would be brilliant, turns out absolutely shocking, probably the most disgraceful individual ever to hold office in this country, never mind the highest office in the land. I told you he was a good bloke, and that you should definitely put all your eggs in his particular basket, and that Brexit would improve your lives. Look, turns out I got it wrong. Anyway, here's what I think you should do today. So, I get it. I understand why newspaper editors and newspaper columnists have no particular choice but to continue banging this drum. Thanks to you, thanks to the many callers I've taken on various issues over the years, and the holy grails, if you like, the particularly precious ones who explain how they have managed to cross the Rubicon from believing things that are untrue to reluctantly accepting things that are true. I know how hard it can be for normal people as well. The average voter, the sunk cost fallacy, the perfectly reasonable position in which you have been put by people who are paid to tell you what's going on in the world. You do your job, we do ours. It's our job to tell you what will happen if you do X. If you leave a customs union or a single market, this will follow. If you... anyway, you know the rest. If you put a proven liar, philanderer, adulterer and lawbreaker into the House of Commons, never mind into number 10 Downing Street, this will happen. Bad stuff will follow. That's our job, but it's not your job, really, to know who's telling the truth and who isn't. You have to keep a close eye on events. And when those events become incontrovertible, when you reach a point where the Metropolitan Police have adjudged the man to be a lawbreaker, when you have the evidence of your own eyes and ears to see that he has lied to you, or he hasn't really lied, because when he said the thing that wasn't true, he actually thought it was true, and that's why it's not a lie, then thankfully the mechanisms of British democracy, the parliamentary system that we have in this country, it's the country, that's called the mother of all parliaments, not the parliament. I only found that out quite recently. I always thought our parliament was the mother of all parliaments, but it's the UK, it's the country that's called the mother of all parliaments. I don't know if anyone else calls it that. Now I come to think of it, it might be one of those examples of British exceptionalism. Oh yes, we've got the mother of all parliaments. And you meet some Greek fella who could quite rightly point out that they invented the word democracy thousands of years ago. It's a little bit rich, philos mou, as a Greek would say. It's a little bit rich, philos mou, to claim that you have the mother of all parliaments. The Romans might have something to say about it as well. Possibly, I don't know, the Egyptians, they seem to lead. The Sumerians were ahead of the curve on lots and lots of things. Possibly they can lay claim to being the mother of all parliaments. But our system does thankfully have mechanisms in place to police the politicians. The checks and balances that our democracy depends upon are strong, but possibly not sacrosanct, because one of the most effective modes of scrutiny is the select committee system, which sees politicians from all parties convene around a single issue. And the vote tomorrow in the House of Commons is the vote on whether or not Boris Johnson's law-breaking and lies, albeit that he claims he didn't realise he was lying when he lied, it should be properly investigated. Now, if you are tugging your forelock so hard at the moment that your eyes are watering, you will be saying something like, I can't believe we're still going on about cake. This is not the radio show for you, all right? I can't reach you if you're if the bone, if the calcified material around your brain has now become so thick that you still think that is a valid contribution to this conversation, there is nothing I can do for you. If your mind is even a tiny bit open, then you've come to the right place. Breaking the law on probably several occasions, lying about it in the House of Commons on probably several occasions, throwing colleagues under a bus, being furious and sickened by the discovery that a party happened, and then segueing effortlessly to the claim that a party was no big deal at all. That is hypocrisy and moral corruption on a scale that I don't think even Thomas à Becket could help you with. So I am absolutely certainly not your man. Maybe go and listen to Mantovani or something like that, because I'm interested in the truth. And the truth, of course, is what a Standards Committee investigation into Boris Johnson could establish without any reasonable doubt. And this I think is crucial, they have the power to request documents. I think, and I may take some advice from a better qualified, i.e. vaguely qualified, commentator and or lawyer a little later in the programme, but I think they would have the power to request some of Sue Gray's paperwork. We're still waiting, of course, for Sue Gray's report to be published in its entirety, and we're still waiting for the Metropolitan Police to conclude their investigations and punishments. But that, of course, doesn't prevent Forelock Tugger over there from claiming that it's all time to move on. And by the way, isn't that Keir Starmer awful, telling the truth about Boris Johnson in the House of Commons? I mean, what has our democracy come to when the Leader of the Opposition stands up in the House of Commons and not only tells the truth about the Prime Minister's actual recorded conduct, but also dares to give a voice to grieving families who've had the indignity of seeing their misery described as fluff by Jacob Rees-Mogg in the course of the last few weeks. Yeah, down with Keir Starmer and all that sort of thing. Honesty, compassion, integrity, decency. We don't want any of that, because if you let any of that into the room, then Boris Johnson becomes an even uglier prospect than he is already. So back to the Select Committee and the fact that they will have the power to request paperwork, to demand detail, to see the affidavits, the actual testimony and evidence given by the people that Boris Johnson claims had assured him that no wrongdoing had occurred. So here is the very simple question for you this morning, and I'd like you to answer it honestly. Don't correct my Greek, all right? Not until after 10:15, okay? Why would the Tory party whip against an inquiry into whether or not Boris Johnson is telling the truth? It may sound like a rhetorical question, and I'm not joking when I say that even I have a saturation point when it comes to the contortions undertaken by client journalists to pretend that any of this is normal, that any of this is acceptable, that any of this is business as usual. It's horrific now to watch. I'll be fine by the end of the week, but I was off last week. I wonder whether you noticed. I was off last week, and sometimes when I get away for a while, I come back refreshed, but also renewed. You sort of grow layers of insulation against how disgusted you should be, because it's happening every day now. You get away for a week, you clear your head, you give it perhaps a bit of a wobble, and you come back and you look at this. I mean, the front page of the Times on Monday was about Johnson apparently letting it be known that he didn't actually think he'd done anything wrong, or he didn't think he'd broken the law. So he simultaneously gives an apology. The backbench Tory MP, Roger Gale, walked out of the 1922 last night after 3 minutes because this faux humility that Johnson put on display in the House of Commons, this pretend... I mean, he's never felt sorry for anything in his life. The only thing he ever feels sorry about is getting caught. And apparently the transformation, according to Roger Gale, from what Johnson was like in the House of Commons, doing the sort of eyes downcast, oh, I'm so sorry, the kind of way he would have spoken to his wives when he was caught cheating on them, or his bosses when he was caught lying to them, or the editor of his first newspaper when he was caught making up quotes from his own godfather. He's been doing this all his life. If he's good at anything, he's good at pretending he's sorry when he's been caught with his fingers in the till, yet again, metaphorically speaking. And so you know what he's doing, and you know that he will make that transformation from faux humility, faux apology, to sort of apparently attacking the BBC and the Archbishop of Canterbury when he actually had the backbenchers in the room with him. But when you get a bit of space, when you can step back from it for a while, it is now the contortions of the client journalists that are even more disgusting, I think, than the backbench MPs. I've had Conservative politicians say to me over the last year, what else can we do? What else can we do? You go out on your own against this guy. Look what he did in December of 2019. Philip Hammond went from Chancellor of the Exchequer to deselection by his own constituency party in the time it took to say, get Brexit done. The time it took to tell that lie and to get David Frost to turn it into a treaty, get Brexit done. Philip Hammond went from Chancellor of the Exchequer to being deselected by his constituency Conservative Party. So I'm not defending these people by any stretch of the imagination. I'm merely pointing out that not all of them have got massive investments in hedge funds or own half of Hampshire because their forefathers were friends with William the Conqueror or whatever it may be. Some of them are in it as a livelihood. Some of them are doing it for a job. Some of them don't want to do anything else. They're hoping that this period will pass and the Conservative Party can go back to something like the party that they joined or that they grew up wanting to join. But a lot of MPs, well, I tell a lie, 3 MPs, I don't meet many, have said to me over the course of the last year, including a minister, actually, what else can we do? Look, I listen to your show every day. What you say is true. He's awful, but he's given us an 80-seat majority. If you want a job in his cabinet or you want a job on his ticket, then you've got to toe the line. You've got to stick up for him. You've got to defend him. I can't turn up in a studio on a Wednesday morning as a minister and say he's disgusting. This is absolutely awful. I can't wait until he's gone because I still want to be here when he has gone. And look what happened to the 20-odd MPs in 2019 who had the audacity to stand up and tell the truth about about Brexit, getting slung out of the House of Commons. So here's the question you need to answer. And the reason why I mention client journalism and the contortions they undertake today is because a new low has been reached with attempts to somehow portray Keir Starmer as the villain of the piece. We still haven't heard the full extent of Boris Johnson's law-breaking, alleged law-breaking. We've heard about some of the proven law-breaking, so he is a law-breaking liar. That's a matter of fact, not a matter of opinion. We've still not heard about 2, 3, possibly 4 more instances of his alleged law-breaking. We haven't heard the Metropolitan Police's judgment on that. But the calls upon you to move on have failed so badly that now they're trying to turn Keir Starmer into the villain of the piece. And that is incredible. So that leads me to this, I think, irresistible question. And it's an opportunity also for you to ring me if you are minded to be less disgusted and outraged by the conduct of the Prime Minister than I am. I'll say it again. If you're punting lines like, I can't believe we're making all this fuss about cake, you're listening to the wrong radio programme, okay? That's absolutely fine. There's lots to choose from. There's more choices on your dial than ever before in your life. So, go and listen to CBeebies or something like that. The question I've got for you, if you are still minded to defend him or you're still swallowing the contortions of the client journalist, is this: why don't they want an inquiry? Why don't they want the Standards Committee to look into this, to look at the paperwork, to examine the claims, to establish beyond reasonable doubt whether or not Boris Johnson lied to the House of Commons? Why would they whip Conservative MPs, i.e. essentially order them on pain of punishment, to resist calls for an inquiry that would exonerate the Prime Minister and prove that he's telling the truth? In other words, if these MPs, or if you think that Boris Johnson is telling anything that remotely resembles the truth about anything at all, why wouldn't you want it to be properly investigated by a body with the powers to scrutinise stuff that the rest of us can't see? So they've turned you against the Church of England, they've turned you against judges, they've turned you against academics, they've turned you against teachers, they've turned you against junior doctors, they've turned you against, well, you name it, they've turned you against them, and now they're trying to turn you against the parliamentary mechanisms that scrutinise government, the select committees that actually have members of the governing party on their roster and who, without fear or favour, seek to analyse the performance of government departments and government members. Why on earth would anybody who thinks for a minute that Boris Johnson is telling the truth not want a Standards Committee to investigate it and therefore prove that the man has nothing to hide, he's told no lies, and he deserves, well, all right, he's already broken the law and been proven to be a liar. But as for all the rest of it, okay, this would prove him right. So, 0345 60 60973. Why? Why would they not want an investigation designed to find out whether or not he's telling the truth? The other thing I was thinking of doing today, that introduction, by the way, was slightly cheeky. You're not really supposed to ring me because the only answer to the question of why they wouldn't want an inquiry into whether or not he's telling the truth is because they know he's not telling the truth. But we'll see where it leads us. The other bit is all of the MPs that said that if he was found to have broken the law, then then the position would become untenable. How did that can get kicked down the road? He has been found to have broken the law, lad. So where are you? It's a funny one, isn't it? Former Chief Whip Mark Harper showing some backbone. Very rare anatomical phenomenon in the context of the current Conservative Party, but it just goes to show that it does exist. It is possible to see the light, to tell the truth, to be honest. And I'm minded also to remind you, we shouldn't really be cheering people to the rafters for being basically decent, for being simply honest. Everything Mark Harper said in his letter to the head of the 22 committee about why he'd lost confidence in Boris Johnson was just true. It wasn't opinion. It was just a litany of facts. But you almost want to give him a round of applause. That's how bad things are. Somebody tells inalienable truth, not even controversial truth, but they do it from the backbenches of the Conservative Party, and that almost makes them heroes. So corrupt is the rest of the institution. Matt's in West Hampstead. Matt, what's going on?
Not too much. How are you doing, Jed?
Very well, thank you. What's on your mind?
I think that the fact that even discounting whether the government are going to whip them or not,
yes,
the fact that they haven't already, he's broken the law,
yes,
that is clear, and the fact that they haven't had a vote of no confidence in him shows the complete lack of talent in the Conservative Party.
Not even close to the 54. I've got 15, I think, by the current count, although that's people who've gone public. There may be more privately, but God knows how many. And I'm trying to find someone who's collated an actual list of all the ones that actually said, if he's found to have broken the law, then that'll be it for me, because they've all gone quiet. And you're suggesting that's because of shall we say, a chilling consciousness of their own competence.
Well, it's incompetence, really.
Yeah, well, it can be both.
They lack any. So,
yes.
I mean, the fact that, it's kind of...
Is there?
Look, politician.
Yeah, I know.
Overall.
Is there, is this unfair today? Is there any answer to the question of why wouldn't they want an inquiry into whether or not he's telling the truth, apart from...
Because he's clearly guilty.
Yeah,
that
apart
much
from
clear,
that.
but they're so afraid that he is guilty, that what comes next? If he's guilty, they either keep him, at which point he's completely damaged and... they go into the next election.
It's incredible, isn't it? We don't want to investigate whether or not the Prime Minister misled Parliament. Why not? Well, there's only one answer to that question. As far as I can tell, I've got one phone line free. So if there's another answer to that question, 03456060973. Talk to me briefly, Matt, the sort of contortions of the client journalists as well now. How can anybody be trying to turn this into a story about Keir Starmer being the bad guy? The mind boggles. I don't know if you've seen the front page of the Daily Express today, but I thought it was Viz.
I mean, I haven't seen it. To be honest, it's baffling that your previous, the previous presenter, Nick Ferrari, saying, why is he continuing on with his line of questioning?
No, I didn't hear him say that. Presumably it was rhetorical. Because if you've got a law-breaking liar in the House of Commons, then it's fundamental to our democracy that we establish the extent of his law-breaking and his lies. So I think we all know the answer to that question.
I mean, but the other thing is, why does he keep on doing the same line of attack? Is there not something else that he can do? Well, he's right.
But it was Boris Johnson's apology. What's he supposed to talk about? Boris Johnson stands up in the House of Commons and apologises for breaking the law, and Keir Starmer's supposed to talk about the price of milk, is he?
Yeah, I mean, and then moving on to Ukraine, well, and saying, we shouldn't get rid of him, we shouldn't get rid of a Prime Minister during the war. How did Winston Churchill come about?
Well, don't tell anyone about what's happening in France at the moment, an actual election. But hey-ho, this is what I mean by contortions. If you're still trying to defend the clown, goodness knows how far over you have to bend now. You're bending over so far backwards that I think you're in genuine danger of snapping. From West Hampstead to Tooting, James is there. James, is this a slightly facetious phone-in? Is there any answer to the question at all of why they don't want an investigation that doesn't involve the knowledge that they don't want an investigation because they know that he's banged to rights?
Hi, James. How are you? First of all, big fan of the show. Been
Thank you.
For a long time.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you very much. Yeah, look, I mean, to be honest, the only reason why I can see why they wouldn't whip against an investigation is that it will just open up the Conservative Party to far more problems than they're already in. Even if Boris Johnson is absolutely telling the truth, which, I don't think he is, that having access to those kind of papers...
Look, there's a first time for everything, James. Let's be honest about it. Kidderminster Harriers nearly beat West Ham in the FA Cup not long ago, so possibly Boris Johnson is telling the truth.
Well, I play devil's advocate and say that,
yes,
he is telling the truth. That would only vindicate him, but then what that might possibly do is, just bring far more stuff out to light that that the party have gotten away with so far in regarding to, the parties over the last 2 years.
I mean, the Mirror puts it well this morning. If you see the Mirror, and bizarrely, such is the state of the British media, they're now owned by the same company. So it's a little bit Murdochian, isn't it, in tossing a coin, shouting heads and tails, and then claiming a win wherever it lands. So Reach PLC has one newspaper saying, what a waste of time, so much more is at stake, which is, the most obscene client journalism I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot. Whereas the Mirror, part of the same stable, just puts it straight. Tomorrow, you vote, it's a message to Tory MPs, on whether to investigate if our PM misled Parliament. You can vote for integrity and decency, or for a liar and a cheat. Your vote will define the character of our nation for many years to come. You choose. So, I mean, they put it a little bleakly, because these MPs won't see themselves as choosing to define the character of our nation for many years to come. They'll see it in terms of self-preservation or in terms of something else. But, I mean, well, you can't answer this any more than I can. What will they be telling themselves tonight, James?
I mean, look, it's to your point earlier. These people are kind of fit for the jobs. I mean, if they go against Johnson and they lose, I mean, that's it. It's the ghost of Philip Hammond, isn't it? I think it's you tell the truth about Brexit and your career is over. It is, but it's also very telling and pretty damning that a former whip has came out and said he's not fit to hold office.
Yes, of course it is. I mean, in normal times, it would focus the attention of some people who should know better. But at times like this, for whatever reason, and we examine the reasons every day, the sunk cost fallacy, the ghost, or rather the phantom of Brexit, the shadow of Brexit still cast over almost everything, the desperate need to cling to the carcass of the notion that is going to be anything like good for the country. I've run out of stories now about the reality of Brexit, but you have to look in odd places. You have to look in the trade media or City AM, oddly, given that the editor at the time of the referendum was a Leaver. City AM now is doing some great coverage of the actual reality of Brexit, but if you've already shut your eyes to the truth in order to pretend that that's still a good idea, then the chief salesman of Brexit, Boris Johnson, I suppose, benefits from all of those closed eyes. These are strange times. So the question is now, I mean, we could carry on. We will carry on, because there might be another one too. Why wouldn't you want an inquiry into whether or not he's telling the truth? Answer, because you know he's not telling the truth. So what do they tell themselves, these Tory MPs? We might list some of them, actually. What do they tell themselves? They go to bed tonight knowing that tomorrow they vote, right? They vote whether or not we're going to have the only real scrutiny of Boris Johnson's claims in the House of Commons that is available to the people. They get to choose whether or not the people get to see the rabbit. They get to choose whether or not Boris Johnson's claims in the House of Commons stand up to scrutiny. The alternative is that they do not get scrutinised. They think, or they claim, or he claims, and they support his claim that he was telling the truth. That no rules were broken, except we know that they were, but that doesn't really count because he had been assured, this might be the crucial fulcrum, he had been assured that no rules had been broken, right? So what this inquiry would do, very simply, is establish whether or not that's true. They would be able to find all of the advisors and either ask them or consult their testimony, in which they would say either, because Dominic Cummings has claimed that he told Johnson that one of these gatherings was illegal. Dominic Cummings has claimed that he told Simon Case, I think it was, one of the Lord High Panjandrums. So there is a possibility, quite a big possibility, that his claims would be blown apart by a Standards Committee investigation. So when I say to you, why wouldn't a Tory MP want a Standards Committee investigation, have you got any other answer than, well, they know that he'd be busted, he'd be banged to rights? And that leads into the second question as we hit the 10:30 news. And the second question is, what do you think they tell themselves at night? What do you think Sajid Javid tells himself at night? Going to bed tonight knowing that tomorrow they are going to vote to protect a liar and to stop light being shone into the dark corners of his calumnies. What do they tell themselves? What does Rishi Sunak tell himself when he goes to bed tonight? What does Jacob Rees-Mogg tell himself when he goes to bed tonight, presuming that Nanny has remembered to iron his nightcap? What do they tell themselves when they go to bed tonight? I mean, think of a decent one. Tom Tugendhat, I don't know, he often gets cited. Ben Wallace having quite a good war, so to speak. What do they tell themselves when they go to bed tonight, knowing that tomorrow they walk into a lobby to cast a vote to corrupt parliamentary democracy on a scale that has never been seen before? 0345 60 60 973, because if the Prime Minister has lied, we need to know. And if there was even the vaguest chance that the Prime Minister hasn't lied, then presumably all of his supporters, all of his champions, all of his cheerleaders would be absolutely desperate to have this investigation. That's why I said to you yesterday, when you defend a liar, you become a liar yourself. You can't sit it out. You can't plead the fifth. You can't give yourself a hall pass on this. You defend a liar, you become a liar yourself. And that means that tomorrow, Tory MPs, you walk into the lobby, you walk into the House of Commons knowing that you are a liar. You are defending a liar. Ergo, you become a liar. Unless there's another answer. And if you're listening, please ring me and tell me. I'd love to hear it. Why else would you not want an inquiry by the Standards Committee into whether or not he misled the House of Commons? Because if you thought there was the vaguest chance he was telling the truth, you'd bite their bloody arm off. This from Paul James. Look at the Tory membership of the Standards Committee. There are two 2019 MPs who may not be loyal to the PM. Possibly that's part of the answer. Well, I don't think you even need the Kremlinology on that one, Paul, actually, because, I mean, being loyal now involves lying. There is no distinction between loyalty and lying. That's what Boris Johnson has done. It's taken him fewer than 3 years, around about almost exactly 3 years, to make loyalty equate with lying. And it has done for his entire career. And, you know, I got bored of pointing it out when he was Mayor of London. I genuinely did. That long litany of calumnies, dishonesties, deceptions that have typified every stage of his personal and professional and political lives. I could do it with my eyes shut. I could do it in my sleep at one point. The stuff about making up quotes from his own godfather when he got fired from the Times, telling Michael Howard that he wouldn't try to combine being editor of The Spectator, or telling Conrad Black that he wouldn't try to combine being editor of The Spectator with being an MP. I mean, it's just incredible. Lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. And being loyal to him has always involved becoming a liar. And I suspect that it's the pomposity of some of the people that turned up at the Garrick Club for the Owen Paterson Preservation Society that prevents them from seeing themselves as liars. You think, well, I used to be the editor of the Daily Telegraph. I can't possibly be a liar just by dint of my loyalty to Boris Johnson. But you sought to mastermind a plan to tear up the rule book on parliamentary standards in order to protect one of your own who had been found to have acted corruptly. That makes you a liar and makes you corrupt. You're corrupt. You're implicit. They all are. Look at America. Donald Trump lied about the election, incited an armed insurrection, sent people baying for his own vice president's blood, careering towards the Capitol, and hardly anybody has cut the cord. Hardly anybody has unhitched themselves from his depraved bandwagon. He's in with I would say, a very good chance of getting back into the White House, in the same way that many of the ugliest political figures of certainly 20th century history were elected by people. You've got a pretty much unapologetic fascist who leads a party with its roots in neo-Nazism, poised to challenge for the French presidency. That's over the other side of the channel. And the polling yesterday about Leave voters and Conservative voters who quite like Marine Le Pen and her 21st century brand of fascism was utterly depressing but utterly unsurprising reading. We are not different from the countries that put despots and authoritarian liars in power. We are not different. We just have checks and balances in place to prevent it from happening. The Founding Fathers never foresaw a Donald Trump riding roughshod over their written constitution, and the architects of our unwritten constitution, the politicians and the judges, the ministers and the civil servants who've assembled the framework that is supposed to prevent abject depravity from rising to the top of our political tree, they never foresaw a Boris Johnson. He will lie about anything, which is why we're probably going to stop talking about him and talk more in the coming weeks about the people who support him, whether it is the client journalist trying to pretend that yesterday's events somehow rendered Keir Starmer the bad guy. I can't say that without giggling, but it's true. It happened. Just look at the front page of the Express. Or, of course, the Conservative MPs who go to bed tonight knowing that tomorrow they are likely to, if they are whipped, it hasn't been confirmed yet, if they are whipped, then they are likely to vote against an investigation into whether or not the Prime Minister lied to the House of Commons, because everybody knows that he did. The second bit's in brackets. That's my theory, my explanation. I wish there was another one, but if there is, you're going to have to bring it, because I can't find it. Rebecca is in Warwick. Rebecca, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, Rebecca.
I think this is a little bit more about self-preservation, and I think we could look to Rishi Sunak as the exemplar there. So a few months ago, he was top of the board to replace Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
Then the information about his wife came out, and even though they said they would only announce if Boris Johnson got a fine, they also told us about Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
And I questioned that at the time, because I thought, well, why are they telling us about him? And it was to put the final nail in the coffin of him being the most popular person to replace.
Did the police make that decision, not the politicians? So, I see...
I know he got one, but they weren't going to release who got one, only if it was Boris Johnson.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So they released the information, and that wasn't the police's choice. Obviously, they gave the fine.
You're doing that thing where you think there's a master plan, and I do it as well. So this isn't a criticism.
I don't think it's a master plan, James.
Right.
I think it is purely the MPs that are thinking, I know he's lied, I know he's a rotter, but I've got this skeleton in my closet, and I don't want that coming out.
Yeah.
And I think they're probably hoping to be whipped.
Enough about their private lives. Enough about their private lives. What about tomorrow's vote?
Well, that could be another skeleton in the closet.
That's a whole new ball game, because that somehow allows them to give their conscience a day off. Although, to be honest, their consciences have been on holiday for the best part of 6 years now.
Exactly. And if they're not told how to vote, then they will have that conscience battle. But I think their own personal preservation will win out, and I think that is what's going on here. It's more about what Boris Johnson potentially has, or what his people around him have on the people that are within their own party.
Well, we know...
I don't think it's a plan. I think it's just a little bit more insidious.
We know, perhaps, that the MPs who've publicly disclosed they've submitted their letters of no confidence, they might defy the whip.
Maybe.
Why can't other MPs defy the whip? And what do you think? Because the first question's kind of rhetorical, but what do you think they tell themselves? Do you think they just close their eyes, put their fingers in their ears and say, well, I can't help it now, I've been whipped? This is why you think they want to be whipped, because they can then lie to themselves about not having any choice but to do the wrong thing tomorrow.
I think there'd be a relief, because they know they're going to do the wrong thing to protect themselves and their positions. It might not be skeletons in the closet. It might just be, I like the job and the position I'm in, it gives me power and I want it. I don't, there could be many, many reasons, but ultimately they're either completely morally absent and they don't care, they just want to keep their jobs, or they're worried about their own personal security, reputation, etc. And I think it's one or the other. It's either they simply don't care, or they're worried for their own safety in terms of reputation and position.
So what do we say about Mark Harper, for example? He does care, and he is prepared. He sees his own career as less important than the dignity of Parliament and the integrity of the Prime Minister's office.
I think tomorrow we'll find out how many like him there are left.
God, and that makes him a hero.
Sadly.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, well, that's where we're at, and it's incredibly frustrating, but I can't see any other reason why anybody with a free choice would not ask for the truth.
In a world where Jacob Rees-Mogg is normal and ordinary, a man who simply tells the truth is extraordinary and heroic.
Yeah.
That's what we've done.
And that's where we're at.
I hope you're wrong. I don't think you are. But I hope you are, obviously. And if you can prove that she is, and remember, why can't we all move on from some cake? And isn't Keir Starmer awful, giving a voice to people whose misery has been largely ignored by the Prime Minister? Then you are, I'm afraid, today listening to the wrong radio programme. Tony's in Horsham. Tony, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. I think that the committee hearing goes much wider than Partygate. It's into the ministerial code, and whether you can tell whether someone has deliberately lied, I think that's a very difficult thing unless you get into someone's head. But if the committee comes up,
courts do it every day.
Yeah, ministers in various governments, Trump, I think, had 30,000 lies, or untruths, as the Washington Post called them. I think it is possible for people to deceive themselves, particularly...
Of course it is, which is why the Select Committee comes along and proves that someone like Owen Paterson lied.
If the committee can prove that that the lying of the Prime Minister was intentional...
all they have to do is find one advisor who can prove, with email evidence or documentary evidence, that the Prime Minister was told that this party was illegal, that they really shouldn't have it. He stands up and says, I was assured that they were all legal, then he's toast. And Cummings has pretty much done that already, as far as I can tell.
He would then say, well, I have another advisor more senior than that one who told me otherwise. I was being given conflicting information.
But then he's lied, because he didn't say he was being given conflicting information. He said he was being given a full confidence that that no rules had been broken. It's the same guy that was sickened and furious by the discovery that a party had happened. And now the claim is that, well, actually, parties did happen, and I did actually go to them, but it's not that big deal at all. So what was he sickened and furious about in the first place? But anyway, go back to your first thesis, your broader net theory.
Yes, I mean, some people believe in flying saucers, and I really believe that Johnson has convinced himself that he doesn't lie and didn't lie. And I think it's up to this committee, and I think its importance goes well beyond Partygate, in being able to establish that that the ministerial code isn't worth the paper it's written on if it says that you have to prove that the Prime Minister or Minister was intentionally lying.
And we're not going to even mount the inquiry. That's the bit that is emerging in today's programme as the most interesting. What do you think they say to themselves when they go to bed tonight, knowing that tomorrow they're going to ride a coach and horses through what passes for a tradition of integrity in our democracy?
They have their careers to think about.
It's that simple,
I think that,
is it? Everyone's saying the same thing. Is it just that simple?
Well, I think they convince themselves in their mind that their career is more important than anything.
And the country.
Because of the country, yes. Yeah. They're going to put in the national interest, they can convince themselves that lying on Johnson's behalf is very important. And I think ministers do it in all governments. I think they
You're being quite generous. I think they're prioritising their career over the country, because no one can really argue that protecting a liar in the highest office in the land, a law-breaking liar, is an act of well, maybe they can, as you say, it's flying saucer territory. Maybe they can convince themselves that it's their patriotic duty to keep a law-breaking liar in Parliament and shut down any attempts to prove that he is an even bigger law-breaking liar than we already know him to be. Wow.
I think you could justify anything in the national interest and conflate your private interests with the national interest and call it the national interest.
And stick a picture of the Queen up in the background and give the implicit impression that you're doing it all on her behalf as well, if you're completely devoid of morality or integrity, and God forbid any politicians would do that, would use a picture of Her Majesty for that.
Well, the flags and the Majesty in the background on the television pictures are really irritating, but they do show that people believe that they're doing it in the national interest, and you can just justify anything, I think, in the national interest, and in your mind you think you're doing it for the for the public good.
You persuade yourself that you are. I take your point, but again, I think you're being more generous than I am. I mean, some of these people lack the intellectual acuity to arrive at the conclusions that you've just described, or to go on the journey that you've just illustrated, and the rest of them, I think, do almost have a sort of atavistic approach to it all. We haven't used the F word today, have we? Or the C word. Come one, come all. Why on earth would Tory MPs not want an investigation into whether or not the Prime Minister misled Parliament? One of the most fundamental fractures in the democratic contract is for a Prime Minister to lie to the Commons, to lie to Parliament. I mean, it's almost beyond precedent. I can't think of Profumo was defence minister, wasn't he? A blatant lie. So, we don't need to investigate it. I guess if we were to be super, super generous in the spirit of the last caller, then we could argue that there's no point investigating whether or not he lied, because it doesn't matter as much as other things that we could be doing. But this is a standard select committee. It exists exclusively to investigate whether or not standards have been breached. It's not as if Ben Wallace is going to be seconded from providing support for the Ukrainian army to investigate whether or not Boris Johnson told a lie. The select committee system is an intrinsic part of our parliamentary democracy, absolutely intrinsic part of our parliamentary democracy. So that doesn't work. But in answer to the question of whether or what these people say to themselves at night, maybe that would be part of it. They can pretend. You know, if you squint a bit, you don't see the full picture. Everything goes a bit blurry. You can pretend that you can't quite. It's like Nelson. Did he ever actually do that? Or is it one of those historical myths that he held the telescope up to the blind eye? It was Nelson, wasn't it? It was supposed to have done that. I've got appalling history. I think it was. And therefore sort of carried on fighting instead of retreating and scored a glorious victory for Britannia or something like that. I don't know. I mean, you held the telescope up to the eye that doesn't work and describe what you can see as being there is no need for an inquiry into whether or not Boris Johnson lied to the House of Commons because it doesn't matter. That's it, because it doesn't matter whether or not he did. So we've got two choices. I don't want an inquiry into whether or not Boris Johnson lied to the House of Commons because we all know that he did and he'll be banged to rights and it'll be even harder for me. Look at the contortions I'm already undertaking. Look, I've spent the whole morning pretending that yesterday's debacle in the House of Commons somehow cast Keir Starmer as the bad guy. How the hell am I going to be able to carry on pretending that Boris Johnson isn't an absolute aberration if we have a parliamentary state? Even Owen Paterson couldn't survive that, despite the best efforts of Jacob Rees-Mogg and the various former columnists on the Daily Telegraph to save his sorry ass. Even they couldn't save Owen Paterson after the Standards Committee came after him. After the Standards Committee found him guilty. If they do that, then how will these quiet journalists and sycophantic politicians be able to defend Boris Johnson? So that's option number one. I just don't want it to be proved by the Standards Committee that he lied, because then I think even I would struggle to come up with a way of pretending that, I don't know, Keir Starmer is the real bad guy, or it's all a big fuss about cake. I don't know what the latest lies are that they're telling themselves and you, but, you know, take your pick. Take your pick. Or, and this is option two, which is marginally more generous and follows on what the last caller said, they are seeking to persuade themselves that even if he did lie to the House of Commons, it would be a waste of time and energy to prove it. It's not great, is it? Whichever way you look at it. But that is Brexit Britain. Fiona's in Maidenhead. Fiona, what do you reckon?
Couple of points, really, James. I think the reason they don't want it to go to an inquiry is because we are teetering on a very precarious global situation with Ukraine, and I don't think any of them want to carry that bucket of muck. Plus the cost of living crisis.
I have to disagree. They would, I mean, probably 100 of them. If you threw the crown in the air now, they would start tearing each other's eyeballs out in the hope of catching it when it lands. Fiona.
Really?
Oh, God, yes. I mean, probably every single one of them, actually.
Oh, well, whether they're competent to do so is another matter.
They can't be any worse than him, can they?
No. But the other point I wanted to raise about Keir Starmer, and it speaks to the wider political landscape at the moment, John Robinson isn't just one person that Keir Starmer was trying to gain political collateral out of, or gains, whatever you want to say. There were tens of thousands of John Robinsons, and my partner was very nearly one of them when his father was in a coma for over a month. And tens of thousands, and you and I are both parents, and we're the similar age. Can you imagine the pain of not being by our child's side?
No, not for a minute.
No, it's the most. Your brain can't even go there, and Keir Starmer is doing what a politician should do. He is speaking for the people that put him in his role. And I think it's time these people had a big shake-up and realised they're our servants and not our masters. And we put them there to help the country for the greater good, not to serve their own careers. And there's going to be tens of thousands of people for the rest of their life they'll never get over not being with their mother or their child.
And they've been told to shut up and go away, in the words of Gavin Williamson. Well, you mentioned fluff, and you're right to do so, because Rees-Mogg kind of almost acts like a canary down the coal mine, doesn't he? He says the truly disgusting things, whether it's about food banks, whether it's about the Grenfell dead, or in this occasion, whether it's about the grieving COVID families, the bereaved COVID families. And it's almost like Johnson watches to see. So Johnson's never gone as low as the Grenfell comments, for example.
No, but that was just a atrocious.
Well, he's never,
unbelievable.
to be fair, he's never needed to. If it involves self-preservation, it's possible Johnson would echo the gross commentary that Jacob Rees-Mogg made about those families, those dead people. Let's not beat about the bush. But he watches to see, and because the fluff comment didn't sort of blow up in Rees-Mogg's face in the way that some of his other exertions have done, then Johnson yesterday thought he'd have a go, or some of the client journalists today thought they'd have a go at it as well. They'd claim that this isn't a very big deal, this isn't very important, this isn't a serious matter. And of course the tragedy is that it's only a few weeks ago they were all claiming that if he's found to have broken the law, he'll have to go, and now they're saying, well, it doesn't actually matter that he did. It's incredible, isn't it?
It's very depressing.
It is depressing. Thank goodness we've got each other to keep our spirits up.
Because, we've got a lot going on in the world, the cost of living crisis, all sorts of things. And if there's a time, then like never before, we need somebody to trust, almost a pastoral care over the nation. And we don't. We've got a school ground bully who gaslights at every opportunity. And I feel sickened for the people in the NHS who are so rudely dismissed by Michael Fabricant. Yeah. I just think every day I'm shaking my head and thinking this is the worst government in living memory. And how could we have possibly sunk so low as to make excuses for these charlatans? It's just depressing.
Well, I think I can answer that. I think you probably can as well. I said I'd use the C word and the F word in this section of the programme. There is the cultishness now surrounding support for Johnson and the impossibility to extricate him from Brexit for many, many people. To recognise the reality of one is to recognise the reality of the other. And then you've got the F word, you've got the footballification, and they just can't do it. They can't cut the cord. They can't unhitch themselves from this ludicrous bandwagon plastered with lies. So many lies plastered on the side of this bandwagon now that it makes the Brexit bus look like an exercise in sincerity. And that, I think, is it. And that's why one wonders, apart from providing each other with company and comfort, one wonders what else we can do to help other people cut that cord. Actually watching events in the House of Commons yesterday, sitting in the Daily Express's editorial office and barking at one of your minions, write me an article about how awful Keir Starmer is. Pardon? Yeah, write me an article now about how awful Keir Starmer is for responding to the apology from the law-breaking liar. Why doesn't he just move on? And, I don't know. I resign. A few stories that you won't be hearing from any media organisations currently encouraging you to stop complaining about Boris Johnson being a law-breaking liar and get cross with Keir Starmer for pointing out that Boris Johnson is a law-breaking liar. And they inevitably perhaps involve the B word. This... from Monday, Brexit bureaucracy leaves British beet rotting. This is a story detailing how a beetroot farmer in England is trying to stay positive despite standing next to a vast pile of rotting beetroot that would once have been worth tens of thousands of pounds. It's a real shame. A lot of effort has gone into this. The 35-year-old farm manager told the Associated Foreign Press. I've never had any crop left over to this volume, and this is a direct consequence of the difficulties he has now in exporting it as a consequence of Brexit. His clients on the continent are telling him we're just going to get it somewhere else now. Thank you very much. This one really does fly in the face of everything you were told. Brexit has brought problems for the Falkland Islands fishing industry. This is Derek Twigg, who's chairman of the Falkland Islands All-Party Parliamentary Group, said there had been a lot of concern over the impact of the UK's exit from the EU on Falkland Islands fishing exports, such as squid. Again, as a direct consequence of Brexit. And finally, I'm not going to use the word favourite, but this is an honest Bob Jenrick's constituency down in Newark, where a majority were persuaded to vote for Brexit. Robert Jenrick is said to be shocked and disappointed by the decision of food producer Good Life Foods to shut up shop and move its entire production to mainland Europe. But don't look over there, look over here, where, well, I don't know, really. I mean, he's doing his best. What's the line? This isn't a rhetorical question. What is the line today? What are you going to say rather than pointing at the truth? What are you going to start talking about? Oh, we can't, there's a war on. He's done very well in Ukraine. What's he done that Keir Starmer wouldn't have done or Ben Wallace wouldn't have done? What's he done? What's he done differently? All right, okay, well, that didn't last long. He got all the big calls on COVID right. Pardon? Well, he just didn't. 20,000 people died because he was a week late calling the first lockdown, according to most expert analysis. So that's just not true. But I guess it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. And that's why, for the next part of the programme, I'd like to nudge you more towards the question of what do you think these Tory MPs tell themselves tonight or tomorrow as they go through the division lobby. And they are voting, we imagine, whether whipped or not whipped, they will be voting against establishing the truth about whether the Prime Minister lied. The best we've got so far, obviously the opener is that they're going to do it because they know that he did and they don't want it to be proved. But that is not the main purpose of the next section of the programme. It's this is it. What do they tell themselves? 0345 60 973. An exercise in psychology, I think, as much as politics. Possibly even an exercise in philosophy or pathology. What do they tell themselves? Imagine you were a Conservative MP and you now had to justify to yourself voting against an inquiry into whether or not the Prime Minister told the truth. And just to make things more interesting, you also have to be someone who is publicly insisting that he has told the truth or that he hasn't lied. So you've got two plates spinning here, right? Would you believe I'm now miming spinning two plates? I must look absolutely ridiculous, especially if you've got me on mute. So you've got two plates spinning. One of the plates is, well, I certainly don't want an inquiry into whether or not the Prime Minister told the truth, right? And the other plate is, well, I'm supremely confident that the Prime Minister has told the truth. And now you've got two plates spinning. Can you do them in the other way around? It's like patting your head and rubbing your tummy. Can you do that? Can you do one clockwise and one anti-clockwise? There we go. It's easy. What am I talking about? It's like I'm on the equator with two plug holes, one on either side of my nose. So those are the two plates you've got spinning. I don't know either, honestly. Seriously, I just opened my mouth. I don't know what's going to come out. You've got two plates spinning. One is, no, I certainly don't want an inquiry into whether or not the Prime Minister is telling the truth. And the other one is, I am supremely confident that the Prime Minister has not lied to the House of Commons. How do you keep those two plates spinning tomorrow when you go into the division lobby to vote essentially to protect a law-breaking liar? What do you think they do? And could you do it yourself? 0345 60 973. 8 minutes after 11 is the time. Martin is in Blackburn. Martin, what would you like to say?
I'd like to talk about Bojo the clown.
Okay, mate.
And what an absolute clown he is. What gives him the right to break the law? He had COVID. He was in hospital.
He didn't realise he was breaking the law, Martin.
Come on, he made the rules.
Obviously, we take from that the lesson that if we were to be busted at doing anything illegal at any point, we can offer up a defence that that we didn't know we were breaking the law.
He lied to the Queen.
Well, he did. That's not quite true. He sent Jacob Rees-Mogg to lie to the Queen.
Well, they're both as bad as each other. But like I said, he had COVID. He knows what it was like. He knows the suffering and how it affected the family. I was in hospital for 8 weeks with COVID. I didn't know if I was going to come out alive. My wife didn't know if she was going to see me again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But this is just fluff, though. We shouldn't be talking about this anymore. This is just fluff, Jacob Rees-Mogg said. We should be talking instead about important things like the Brexit opportunities that he's looking for.
I'd like to call him something else, but...
Yeah, well, don't, because it's me that gets punished.
I can't, unfortunately, but...
I mean, you can't get... I mean, it's funny, isn't it? You mentioned your hospitalisation. 8 weeks with your wife at home, not knowing whether you'd ever come back. And he thinks somehow they think we shouldn't talk about this stuff. And it's not relevant to the fact that the laws we put in place to prevent other families from going through what your family went through got broken by the people that made the laws, and we should all stop talking about it because it's not important. I know it's more psychology again, but is it because they don't think they don't care?
care.
But they must love their own families.
Themselves.
They must love their own families, mustn't they? They must be able to imagine what it would have been like if their wife or husband had been in hospital.
Boris Johnson thinks he's above and beyond the law. He thinks,
clearly
I didn't know it was a party. Absolute rubbish. There was an email that went down and said, bring your own bottle.
Yeah, that was a different party from the one that we're talking about today.
Yeah, but it's still a party which you shouldn't have had.
I know, and obviously the party in the garden might not actually have been a party either. It might have been a
The guy is an utter clown.
Yeah, that's a bit generous, really. Clown works in his favour. I voted for him many years ago to be mayor of London because I thought he was a clown. I thought London needed a clown. It would have been in the way that Ronald McDonald has shifted a lot of burgers over the year. I thought that Bojo the Clown, as you call him, could actually be quite good for brand London. Would you believe?
It's a good damn possibility, especially with his hairstyle.
Yes, it's
you know what I mean? And you get people that going on about Keir Starmer saying,
not many people.
They shouldn't be talking about people's families.
Yeah, I don't know if many people have actually said that.
There was a caller on yesterday yesterday afternoon. She was called Helen.
Okay.
And what an utter waste. She just said, we didn't have a party. It wasn't a party. I've had parties, and I know what parties are.
Yes.
You know,
I'm never entirely comfortable in having callers who aren't here to defend themselves picked apart by other callers on the programme any more than I'd be comfortable having Helen putting the boot into Martin in Blackburn today. But if we were to use her as an exemplar of people who've forgotten how to think for themselves, so they will just repeat whatever the Daily Mail has... speaking of which, well, I'll tell you in a minute, but they will just repeat what the Daily Mail has told them to think and what to say. And today's message from the Daily Express is that dreadful scene in Parliament yesterday when the Prime Minister was forced to apologise for being a law-breaking liar.
No apology.
Yeah.
That was not an apology.
Yeah, but that's all Keir Starmer's fault. It's all Keir Starmer's fault.
Right, okay.
Down with that sort of thing.
He has to learn to take responsibility.
It's never going to happen, Martin. It's never going to happen.
Will never, ever...
No, it won't. All right, final question. What do they tell themselves tomorrow as they walk into the division lobby? You've got your two plates spinning. You're the Conservative MP.
What does it say? What can we do to the working class people to make life a misery? Because that's all they ever do. They don't think about the working class like myself and yourself. Well, they just think about themselves. In my case,
yes. But that's not it. So you've got two plates spinning. One of them is he's absolutely not told any lies to the House of Commons. The other one is I absolutely don't think we need to... Well, taking it literally. I can smash the plates over someone's head and hopefully it'll shut them up for 10 minutes, especially that O'Brien bloke on the radio and that fella from Blackburn who's rung him up today. Honestly, 12 after. Martin, take care of yourself. I'm glad you came out of hospital, and I feel your anger about having it described as fluff or unimportant, or this suggestion that somehow giving voice to people who stared into the abyss and climbed out of it like your family did, or who never did and never will. People, tens of thousands of people dead. But we shouldn't talk about that, and we certainly shouldn't give them a voice in the House of Commons when discussing the laws that they obeyed, while the man who made them is proven not to have obeyed them. And I mean, you look for the marks of the ridiculousness now. So what these MPs now are reduced to doing, and you know, one of our callers yesterday, I think she might have been called Helen, I presume it was a different Helen from the one that Martin refers to. She mentioned Paul Scully. She actually mentioned him when we should start an actual league table of the ministers that get sent out to debase themselves on Boris Johnson's behalf, to sacrifice anything that remains of their own integrity upon the altar of Boris Johnson's narcissism. And she mentioned Paul Scully, and lo and behold, as if by magic, it was his turn to go out and do it today. And what they seem to me to be reduced to doing now, with Paul Scully just edging ahead of James Cleverly for today at least, as the most... I'm sorry to say, the most pathetic of all, is that they're now saying that the Prime Minister accepts that the police have found him to have broken the law, but they won't say that he accepts that he has broken the law. Come on. The Prime Minister accepts that the police... So here's the question. Does the Prime Minister accept that he has broken the law? Oh, and that's why, isn't it? Because of all the MPs who said if he is found to have broken the law, then I will submit a letter of no confidence. What they didn't say at the time was, if he is found to have broken the law but doesn't admit it, then I'm golden. He can stay for as long as he wants. So the Prime Minister accepts that the police have found that he has broken the law. But if you ask him whether or not he accepts that he's broken the law, they will tell you that he accepts that the police have found him to have broken the law. You wouldn't let your 6-year-old get away with that. So why do you let your Prime Minister? It's a funny one, isn't it? What do you think they tell themselves tomorrow as they have the opportunity to vote for an investigation that would prove whether or not Boris Johnson was telling the truth or hasn't lied to Parliament? They are now insisting he hasn't lied to Parliament. I play you some of those Paul Scully interviews from this morning, actually, because they were masterclasses in dissembling. And you sort of... again, you can see why people are reduced to trying to turn this into a conversation about Keir Starmer, can't you? Because if you were really... Imagine if you were a cheerleader, right? You got your pom-poms, you've got your skimpy outfit ready, and admittedly, right-wing journalists are not going to make the most toothsome of cheerleaders. They're not necessarily the people, male British right-wing or female right-wing journalists and tabloid columnists are not necessarily the people that you'd put front and centre in order to inject a little bit of glamour into your proceedings. But imagine if you are a cheerleader for this lot. And you've got your pom-poms ready, you've got your outfit on, you've polished your sneakers, and you're going onto the pitch before the team comes on, before Team Johnson comes onto the pitch. It's your job to march out down the tunnel and throw your legs in the air and start doing a human pyramid and doing some forward rolls. All right, there's probably something a little bit more impressive than a forward roll that you'd want to do, but you should see the state of some of these journalists, and you're there, way, Team Tory, Team Johnson, pom-pom shake, bum wiggle, it's all going on, and now you've got to answer the question of does he accept that he's broken the law? Well, I think Keir Starmer's awful. Pardon? Does he accept? Has he? Well, I think we should all move on and stop talking about cake. Has the Prime Minister misled the House of Commons? Pretty much the most egregious constitutional breach that a Prime Minister can undertake in the context of parliamentary conduct. Well, I don't think we need to bother. Blah, 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 blah. And I think Paul Scully wins a prize this morning. So if you put the editor of the Daily Express on the client journalist podium today's award for client journalism extraordinaire, the editor of the Daily Express deciding that today was the day to attack Keir Starmer for his response to an apology Boris Johnson had been forced to give to the House of Commons, then I think Paul Scully is going to be on the political podium of self-debasement. And here he is enjoying Kay Burley's attentions on Sky News earlier today.
Does he accept that he broke the law?
He's accepted that the police have come up with a different conclusion to what he thought at the time.
Does he accept he broke the law, though?
He accepts the police have found him to have broken the law.
Yeah, but does he accept?
Well, I don't know. I mean, again, it's speculation because I haven't spoken to him about it.
Do you accept that he broke the law?
Well, the police have found that because the only other way of doing it is to go to a court and contest a fixed penalty notice, and frankly, that's just not that the system that we have about fixed penalty notices. That's not really the appropriate thing to do.
So, given that you accept that he broke the law, why can you still support him? Why can a sitting Prime Minister who is a lawbreaker be a lawmaker? Because it's you're opening the Prime Minister interpreted what he felt with at the time of the law, the guidance at the time. And that's what he did. He took his decision in the heat of the moment, but he's accepted he's done wrong. He's accepted he's made a mistake. He's made a full apology 30 times, as you say yesterday in his statement. And I don't think anyone could really see that and think that he wasn't contrite.
I focus on the Daily Express today because even the Daily Mail has balked at. I mean, they've done a bit of a distraction one. Apparently, a self-driving car. This is a front-page story in the Daily Mail on a day when the House of Commons. The House of Commons is contemplating the question of whether or not they should have an investigation into whether or not the Prime Minister has actually misled the actual House of Commons. Biggest story in town for the Daily Mail. Watch the TV in self-drive cars up to 37 miles per hour. I've said it before and I'll say it again. My news sense is shot to pieces. I've not got a clue what a major story is at the moment. Prime Minister lying to the House of Commons or self-driving cars with tellies in them. We'll go in hard on that after 12. Oh, we can't. There's PMQs on the way. And I thought he was on his way to India as a way perhaps of avoiding PMQs this week. But I'm told that it will be a Boris Johnson, Keir Starmer Prime Minister's questions with you from 12 noon. Do you know what I thought this morning? You promise not to laugh, all right? For a minute, I thought that PMQs were like bins day. And therefore, because there was a bank holiday on Monday, I thought PMQs got pushed forward a day. How many times have I done PMQs on the Wednesday after a bank holiday? But just for some nanosecond, I'm sitting on the train and I'm thinking, is it PMQs? Oh no, it was a bank holiday on Monday, so PMQs is tomorrow. And then I sort of thought, oh shucks, I haven't put the bins out. And then I thought, oh no, that's all right, it was a bank holiday on Monday, I'll put the bins out tomorrow. So that would be great. They should do that. That would make life easier. Isn't it supposed to be PMQs today, Theo? No, James, it was a bank holiday on Monday. Have you put the bins out? Theo Usher will be joining us, as ever, to to prepare us for PMQs shortly before 12 noon. I can't see much point in talking about anything else at the moment, apart from, of course, the huge tale of self-driving cars featuring televisions. But I don't know, what is there to say about that, apart from what a huge and important story it is. 22 after 11. What do they say to themselves? Should I play that Paul Scully clip again to prove the point? I think once more, just because this is, you might think I'm exaggerating, or you might think I'm, I don't know, embellishing or over-egging the pudding. And please don't think it's me that's saying this. Mark Harper, a former chief whip of the Conservative Party. Theresa May, the Queen of Windrush, the mother of the hostile environment, finds Priti Patel's asylum policy a little bit too much. If Mrs. Hostile Environment herself is turning around to you and saying, this new refugee policy you've got, it looks a bit brutal to me, looks a little bit callous. You'd think anybody with a functioning cerebral cortex would pause for a moment. And I know we're talking about Priti Patel, so it's a reach. But you'd think they might pause for a moment and just go, do you know, if Theresa May thinks this is a bit much, if Mrs. Hostile Environment thinks this one is maybe we have sort of gone a little... Then, of course, you remind, well, it's not actually designed to achieve anything. It's just designed to throw red meat to racists and upset the woke mob who don't like racism. But I don't know, I guess Theresa May is now woke, which reminds me, we haven't done Woke Watch today. I've got a Woke Watch for you involving a dinosaur. Would you and I mean a real dinosaur, not a sort of member of the 1922 committee or a Daily Mail columnist, an actual dinosaur. So Woke Watch features a dinosaur. A little bit of Paul Scully, this is what they have to do now. This is what they have to do now. When you defend a liar, you become a liar. When you defend someone who debases standards, you debase yourself. And I'm sure Paul Scully is a lovely bloke, and I don't mean that facetiously. I know you won't like this, some of you won't like this, because you like your politics raw and binary, regardless of which side you're on, but there are decent people in the Conservative Party, there are decent people in the Parliamentary Conservative Party who are doing things they don't want to do for reasons. I've had times in my career where I've wondered whether I should resign in protest at some of the company that I was compelled to keep, but I didn't. I don't know whether that was a moral transgression on my part, whether I compromised my integrity. I don't think I did, but of course I wouldn't I? So there'll be people on the Conservative benches who find Boris Johnson every bit as despicable as you do, but who are sitting there because they don't see why they should give up their careers or give up their futures or their livelihoods when he won't be here at some indistinct, probably sooner rather than later point in the future. And I offer that as an explanation and an excuse. Because you know how much I slag off the Daily Mail, right? It's very important to recognise, for me at least, and for you to know that I recognise this, that if the cards had fallen differently in my career, I could have been working there. I can't afford to pick and choose where I ply my trade. I'm getting to a point now, 50, where I can a bit. But up until very, very recently, until I started writing books, actually, I couldn't afford to pick and choose what microphones I sat behind. I kind of talked myself out of ever getting a job in Murdoch's empire. I can live with that. But as for the rest of it, and then, of course, I talked myself out of getting a job with the BBC by being right about Brexit, Donald Trump and Boris Johnson, which in the current BBC management structure is absolutely unforgivable. Not that it's done them much good. They've still got Nadine Dorries trying to close them down. But you can't pick and choose. You can't. I don't know. Maybe I'm not Jesus. You know, maybe you should prioritise principle over absolutely everything. But I know there are good people on the Daily Mail. I know there are good people in the Conservative Party. I just also know that the people at the very top of both of those institutions are despicable. So make what you will of Paul Scully. This is what happens when you defend a liar.
Does he accept that he broke the law?
He's accepted that the police have come up with a different conclusion to what he thought at the time.
Does he accept he broke the law, though?
He accepts that the police have found him to have broken the law.
Yeah, but does he accept it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, again, it's speculation because I haven't spoken to him about it.
Do you accept that he broke the law?
Well, the police have found that because the only other way of doing it is to go to a court and contest a fixed penalty notice. And frankly, that's just not that, you know, the system that we have about fixed penalty notices, that's not really the appropriate thing to do. So given
that you accept that he broke the law, why can you still support him? Why can a sitting Prime Minister who is a lawbreaker be a lawmaker?
Because it's, you're opening, the Prime Minister interpreted what he felt with at the time, the law, the guidance at the time. And that's what he did. He took his decision in the heat of the moment, but he's accepted he's done wrong. He's accepted he's made a mistake. He's made a full apology 30 times, as you say yesterday in his statement. And I don't think anyone could really see that and think that he wasn't contrite.
Really, a full apology if you won't reveal whether or not you broke the law, whether or not you think you broke the law. I'm very sorry for the fact that the police think I broke the law. Did you break the law? I'm very sorry for the police think I broke the law. Did the Prime Minister break the law? He's like, police law broke. Malfunction. That's going to happen next. One of them's actually going to malfunction live on television. I wonder which one it'll be. Probably Andrew Bridgen. He's in trouble. Have you seen the Andrew Bridgen story? Well, Google it. I'm not entirely clear on what I can and can't say legally, but Google it. It'll warm the cockles of your heart, old Andrew. I'm entitled to an Irish passport because I'm British. Bridgen, vote me. I need to apologise to Mick in Ipswich and Alan Camberwell. I never know when I'm going to go off on one of these slightly eccentric tangents, and I didn't think I was going to go off on one of them then, but I did, which means they've been sitting there on hold listening to all these burblings, and they're not now going to have time to get on the show until after the next news bulletin. Mick, are you there, Mick, in Ipswich?
Yes, I am, James.
Will you accept my apology for keeping you on hold for so long while going off on a self-indulgent ramble?
No.
What can I possibly... well, I think you'll find that you do actually accept my apology. I have been advised... I've been advised by all of my key staff and personnel that you do, in fact, accept my apology, Mick in Ipswich, even though you publicly state that you don't.
No. Don't forget, James, I'm from Kidderminster too. We're awkward.
It's not wrong. I've got to flip an act. Got to put him on the VIP lane. We'll squeeze him in after... Well, we're going to go to the news, and then I want to speak to Adam Wagner. I may squeeze Mick in before Adam Wagner, because that might seem polite, and then we'll get a lawyer's insight on what is going on with regard to this inquiry that probably won't go ahead, because all of the people that are absolutely adamant Boris Johnson didn't mislead the House of Commons are also absolutely adamant that there's no point having an inquiry into whether or not Boris Johnson did mislead the House of Commons. PMQ's on the way. Before that, a little bit of speculation on what Conservative MPs might tell themselves tomorrow as they simultaneously support the idea that the Prime Minister has not misled the House of Commons while voting against an inquiry into whether or not the Prime Minister has misled the House of Commons. Mick is in Ipswich via Kidderminster, God's own country. Mick, can you remember why you rang in?
Just about, James. I think it's a mixture of fear and self-interest.
Yes.
There's got to be at least 150 MPs on the Tory side who have basically got a 20, 30, maybe even 40-year career in front of them if they don't rock the boat.
Yes.
They may not become ministers or anything important, but they've got the MP's job for the rest of their days or as long as they want it. And so they are not going to rock the boat.
A simple calculation, which, I mean, you describe it in stark terms, but I mean, many of us may behave similarly if faced with similar dilemma. No?
Yes.
Or no or yes? Yes.
Yes. I mean, as you said, you did.
Possibly.
And, that's...
But I won.
You have to make these decisions. but as I said, I believe, to your assistant many hours ago, that it's the same with the Trump mob,
Yes,
I mean, I'm
is.
sure there's lots of them don't agree with it, but they know if they make a fuss, they'll be...
I'm out of this job if I mean, there is... I think I was being a little harsh on myself, actually. If I had been required to stand up and claim that some unnamed former colleague was not a massive racist and was, in fact, a stand-up guy or gal with a splendid future ahead of them, I probably would have walked the plank at that point. So there are degrees, aren't there, of...
Yes.
Of self-interest that exercise them. So, I mean, I used to review video games for the Daily Mail, Mick, in a previous life, but it was yes, I know, but it was a different beast back then. So, do you think that's what they say? They may not be explicit, but they walk into the lobby and they say, "Look, you've got to do this. Hold your nose, because otherwise you'll be down at the job centre on Tuesday."
Now, think about what you said earlier about Philip Hammond.
Yeah, exactly.
He was like one step away from the top job.
Incredible.
And then he's gone.
Yeah.
And, if you're the basic MP, you're looking at getting on for 90 grand a year, plus your little bits and bobs here. And maybe there's a lot of them, again, as you've said, about the cabinet, and I'm sure people who aren't in the cabinet, most of them, what would they be fit for? Not much. And so they've got a good gig, so they keep it.
You're right. We focus on the ones with hedge funds and inherited wealth, or who made millions flogging get rich quick schemes under false names while on the false names on the internet. And we forget about, I mean, the one who yesterday was talking about how church and state have been separated in this country for years, and who claimed that if we gave kids dinner vouchers, they'd be spent in crack dens and brothels. It's unlikely that any of that lot are going to get a job doing anything else probably anytime soon, so they will just be thinking of the future, thinking of the livelihood. Thank you, Mick. It was as ever worth the wait. Adam Wagner, as you know, is a barrister at the Doughty Street Chambers and has provided us with much needed guidance on quite a few issues recently, and it is to Adam we turn next for just a sort of insight really into the role of a parliamentary standards investigation of the PM. And I doubt you'll speculate, but if you feel like it, why anybody who is confident that the Prime Minister has done nothing wrong would be reluctant to see that established by such an investigation and the Prime Minister clearly fully exonerated.
Good afternoon. Hi, James.
Hey, mate.
Well, I mean, the ultimate outcome of this investigation would be to decide whether the Prime Minister has misled Parliament. So the starting point would be, what statements has he made to Parliament? I think he's been quite careful with his statements to Parliament. I think that it's not obvious he's knowingly misled Parliament, which would be the resignation issue under the ministerial code. But I think one area that's going to be difficult for him is that he said he made a very clear statement in relation to the 18th of December Christmas party that all guidance was followed and that he had been assured all guidance was followed. So that is not a matter of opinion. Either he was or he wasn't assured that all guidance was followed. And I find it amazing to think that he was assured that, given that the guidance at the time from the government, from his government, said you must not have a Christmas party. So either he was lied to, given what we've heard, and he's the sort of innocent victim of all of this, or he wasn't telling the truth to Parliament. And I think, personally, that is going to be what could undo him. And the problem for him with a Parliamentary Standards Committee investigation is they can demand documents and they can demand oral evidence. So they can look to, well, who was advising him at the time of the party, but also by the time he made that statement not very long ago to Parliament. Who advised him? Who were these people that assured him that all guidance was followed? What's the document trail? Because I would have thought there are emails and there are text messages, and from the time and also more recently. And can he stand up that claim that he was assured all guidance was followed? So I think that's an example of the kind of investigation they would do.
What could they call in terms of documentation or testimony that the Met or Sue Gray wouldn't have already called in, so to speak?
Well, the Met and Sue Gray weren't looking at this issue. So the Met and Sue Gray were looking at, did these parties happen? And did they break the rules? That's essentially the issue, the locus of those investigations. This would be very different. This is about, they would have, I mean, Sue Gray and the police would ignore the statements that the Prime Minister made to Parliament because they're not relevant to whether he was at gatherings, to whether the gatherings happened. This is completely different.
Like, I didn't realise I was speeding, officer. It doesn't matter, does it? You were speeding. Here's the figure. You're busted.
Yeah, but exactly. It's irrelevant to the question of whether he broke the law, what he thought he was doing at the time, or what he was told he was doing at the time. Either you break the law or you don't break the law. And as people, as it's the popular expression, ignorance of the law is no defence. But that's a completely separate issue as to whether very recently, in the last few weeks, his statements to Parliament have been knowingly misleading, which is supposedly the resignation issue. So Sue Gray will not have had emails and text messages and memos that were given to the Prime Minister, minutes of meetings. Sue Gray will not have heard from the people who were advising the Prime Minister before he gave that speech to Parliament, and neither will the police. They won't have been interested in that. So this is actually, I heard this morning on the radio a minister saying, well, look, we've already got 2 investigations running. Well, there aren't any investigations running into this very important question of whether he told the truth to Parliament or not. That's the difference, and it would look at quite different issues, quite different evidence.
Yes, of course. So quite disingenuous to point at the Sue Gray and the Met investigations into whether parties occurred and who attended them as reasons why we shouldn't be having an investigation into whether or not the Prime Minister misled the House of Commons, which, as you say, is...
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's totally disingenuous, because forget Sue Gray. I think Sue Gray is separate.
Sure.
I think the police investigation is ongoing. And one of the problems with the Prime Minister making any statements about what happened, either directly or indirectly through his allies in the newspapers, is if he says something like "I was treated harshly," I think that the Chancellor has said explicitly that that there was a stringent application of the rules by the Metropolitan Police, which I think that was the word he used, which I thought was bordering on inappropriate, because what he's saying is your ongoing investigation seems to be treating us unfairly. I think that was the coded message, I thought. And the Prime Minister, if he is responsible for what the newspapers are reporting, that he thinks that he's got a different interpretation of what happened. Again, that puts pressure on an ongoing investigation. So I think there's an element of the actual investigation itself should be able to run its course. But I don't think I think the parliamentary standards investigation can steer clear of that in relation to anything that's already been decided by the Metropolitan Police. But if you go back to the 18th of December Christmas party, they will want to know what evidence the Prime Minister saw of what happened. So they want to know, but by the time he made that statement, what evidence had he seen? Had he seen a load of photographs of people, dancing a conga, holding beers, and wearing Christmas hats? Or had he not? So they are going to have to request that evidence, which may be with the police. So there may be a bit of crossover, but I think they don't necessarily have to cast their net that wide, and they can ask for documents that aren't with the police, that are very specifically those memos, those texts, whatever, about what he knew at the time and what he was advised, particularly.
And this, to quote your Twitter thread from this morning, is why he will be resisting this at all costs. Is it confined then to December the 18th? What I know that, well, it is on the line to Parliament, isn't it? The potential line to Parliament. So if, for example, Dominic Cummings could prove that he had told the Prime Minister that another party would be in breach of COVID guidelines, that wouldn't impact upon the ministerial code, because Johnson hadn't claimed in Parliament that he'd been given different advice on. It's just that one party and that one claim that...
Well, I mean, that's my sort of narrow interpretation of it. I know that others take a wide... He has made other statements, and he's made statements that sound quite wide. Things like, look, all rules were followed in number 10, he said, in response to that question about the 18th of December party. So you might say I think he's been quite careful and clever about it, because he's made it sound like he's talking about everything while not actually, while also being able to go back and say, well, actually, I was only talking about this or that. He's been behaving throughout, I think, as someone who knows he's in trouble and who knows bad things happened in number 10, and has been trying to, give the impression of reassuring Parliament, but at the same time avoid being hoisted by this by the ministerial code later down the line. But the fact that he's been careful doesn't mean he's necessarily been careful enough. So that would be, I mean, that's the point of the Parliamentary Standards Committee investigation, is look at this question of, has he been truthful? Has he knowingly lied? And what did he know at the time? And that's it's resolvable by the Standards Committee, but it won't be resolved in any other context.
Is it completely resolvable? If he can't produce evidence that he was assured all guidance was followed, but could argue that just because he can't produce the evidence that he was assured, or he could say it was done orally, there would still, as you've just alluded to, the fact that he is adept at walking tightropes between truth and untruth, he could do the same here, could he not? Even if it went to committee, he could say, well, all right, we haven't actually got any evidence that I was assured that all guidance had been... Well, because then he'd have to tell who gave him that advice, and they could call them as a witness. So he's going to need something to back up his claim if it goes to committee, which is why he's desperate for it not to go to committee.
Yeah, I mean, but you can bring, just because something's been said orally doesn't mean you can't get evidence.
Yes,
you can
exactly.
get the people who told him to come and give evidence, and that's I can understand why he doesn't want any of this, because it might unravel what has been essentially a cover-up, and I think that's the sort of always the secondary risk in this kind of political scenario, is that there's obviously been law breaking, there's been criminal breaches throughout the course of about a year. There's a lot of that. Seems to a lot of it has been going on, and at the same time, I think that the very interesting and important constitutional or political issue, or whatever, ethical issue, probably is the best way of putting it, is all this was going on for, it's a pattern of behaviour that was happening for about a year. 12 gatherings is a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot of. I was reading back on some of my old tweets about this, and I saw that it was reported at one point that somebody anonymously told the newspaper, well, we all stayed for drinks on Friday nights in Number 10 because it was the only place you could socialise at the time. And it's quite obviously there was, it's a pattern of rule breaking throughout, the course of at least, a year. So at what point does that become something that was concealed? Right. Was it deliberately concealed? When did the Prime Minister know about it? Did he always think that it was against the rules? Did people know it was against the rules and deliberately try to conceal that? It moves from simple law breaking to quite, to even more serious misconduct type law breaking, and I think that's a really important picture. When you zoom out on it and you avoid talking about things it's about cake. It's not about cake.
Of course,
it's about a pattern of law breaking at the heart of government that lasted a long time while everyone else was stuck in their homes.
Which is, of course, why some people are desperate to pretend that it is entirely about cake. Adam Wagner, many thanks indeed. Adam, as you know, a human rights barrister at the Doughty Street Chambers and also Professor of Law at Goldsmiths University, part of the University of London. 11:47 is the time. I'll leave you with a little addict. Well, not leaving you. I'm still here. I'm here till 1 o'clock. If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. That's what this lot usually say, isn't it? If they're talking about infringements upon your liberties or your civil liberties or investigations, you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. So why not have an investigation? Why not have an inquiry by the Standards Committee? I mean, PMQs is on the way. I've forgotten to do this a bit lately. I always come back from holiday full of good intentions. And they usually last a day or two, and then I go back to my terrible old habits. I've told you before, I used to work at the Daily Express, which was on the south bank of the River Thames, just on the other side of Blackfriars Bridge. And I'd come back from holiday. I used to have quite long holidays in those days, sometimes as long as 3 weeks. Can you believe that? It's because I was freelance. And I would walk over Blackfriars Bridge in the morning, and I'd think to myself, right, it's time you started looking after yourself better, son. So no drinking at lunchtime. And also make sure you start doing more sport. And that would be on a Monday morning, my first day back from holiday. And then about 4 o'clock on Monday afternoon, I'd find myself walking back over the same bridge, half cut, after going out for a rather splendid gossip columnist's lunch. And I'd think, oh, well, that one didn't last. That one lasted 2 or 3 hours. So I'm going to remember for at least a week to summon the Usherwood properly and indeed to do Woke Watch. But I need your help with the second one. I need nominations for Woke Watch. This is our ongoing attempt to illustrate just how pathetic it is to claim that wokeness is your enemy or that there is somehow a conspiracy underway. It's the new political correctness. Remember when people used to ring me and they almost perhaps come through to the wrong programme? So they'd say something like, well, it's political correctness gone mad. And they'd expect the presenter to say, yeah, I completely agree with you. Whereas I would say, what does that mean? And they sort of end up saying, well, I suppose it means trying not to be offensive or being polite. And I said, well, what's wrong with that then? And that's now where we are with woke. So first of all, this is almost like a Nick Abbott tribute act. We're going to play 2 sound effects in the space of the next 30 seconds. First of all, summon the Usherwood! And now it's time for Woke Watch.
Interim wipe down.
Where's Nick Abbott when you need him? Honestly, we've only got 3 in the history of the show. We've only got 3 and you just press it. Oh, Mikey, mate. Shall we try again? Are you all right? Are you sure? Are you ready? Are you good? Let's do it.
Woke Watch.
Woke BBC bosses, I don't know, you've got to get the language right when you're doing these things. This is from the Sun newspaper. Woke Beeb bosses are to reframe the reputation of the terrifying Tyrannosaurus Rex, claiming the raptor has had a bad rap. The prehistoric predator, which features in classic movies, including Jurassic Park. I mean, yeah, I suppose, in the way that kind of, I don't know, robots with sentient robots feature in Star Wars, you could claim that the Tyrannosaurus Rex features in movies such as Jurassic Park, is to receive what the Beeb calls a more rounded treatment in Dinosaurs: The Final Day. So David Attenborough will examine things that Tyrannosaurus Rexes possibly did that don't involve tearing, I was about to say people to pieces, because of course that's what happens in Jurassic Park, but there weren't any people around when the dinosaurs walked the earth. You're writing this down, it's all true, it's all gospel. So there it is, there is the phrase. The new meaning of woke is more rounded treatment. Down with more rounded treatments of anything. Director Matthew Thompson said, predators often get a bad rap on TV as they're shown as eating machines, as if that's all they really do. We want to show different sides to the creatures and come up with some storylines that are a little bit different and a little bit gentler. So, if you're talking about slavers, a more rounded treatment is a very good thing. You shouldn't focus on the actual murderous Holocaust that they presided over. You should focus instead upon the fact that they opened a school in Bristol with some of the money that they ripped out of the heart of Africa. So more rounded treatments for slavers, good idea. More rounded treatments for creatures that walked the earth millions of years ago, bad with rounded treatments for dinosaurs, up with rounded treatments for slave owners and traders. And that's the end of... Have you got this, Mikey? You sure? I'll give you 50p if you do an interim wipe down. And that's the end of today's Woke What. He's just said, I don't know in response to what, that a lot of people made money out of COVID in a way that they probably shouldn't have done. Boris Johnson has just said that. That's an interesting admission, isn't it, given the official finding, that being on the government's own VIP lane increased tenfold your chances of landing a lucrative COVID contract. I'm quite keen to remind you of what's happening at the moment, just in case you've lost sight of the ball. This is in cricket terms, this is just blocking the fast bowlers, in the knowledge that if you can keep blocking them, eventually they'll go away. So, and it pains me to remind you how many people in my profession help those pom-pom wavers. It doesn't matter what the story is. I presume there's an exception to this rule. I mean, if he killed someone, if he shot someone on Fifth Avenue, there has to be, doesn't there? We have to keep believing that. But the longer it goes on, the longer you prevaricate, obfuscate, postpone, delay, deny, the longer you can do that, the less urgent the problem becomes. This is what he is brilliant at. Doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a mistress who you claimed was giving you technology lessons. It doesn't matter how outrageous the lie, how egregious the deception, how absurd the denial. I wasn't breaking COVID rules. I was testing my eyesight when I drove to Barnard Castle and back. It's contagious, even Dominic Cummings caught it from him. It doesn't matter how ridiculous it is. If you can get it out there, then it starts chipping away at public feeling, because we are weird creatures, humans. We move on. Think about how we recover from grief, how we recover when you're a teenager, you get dumped and you think your life will never be the same again, and you look back 10 years later, you think, what on earth did I ever see in him or her? We are a bizarrely resilient species. I think it's probably evolutionary, and part of that is probably having a sort of meerkat-like ability to keep an eye on the horizon. I mention this for a number of reasons, but did you know your mental health will be greatly improved by actually having a good look at the horizon for 10 minutes every day? It's part of our lizard brain. Just having you relax when you know there's no threat coming. So if you get the opportunity, 5-10 minutes, just have a look as far away as you can. So I said to you during lockdown that I noticed I really missed big skies. Really missed big skies, and seeing big skies and horizons and seeing that they're clear is just curiously comforting and very, very good for your mental equilibrium. But I digress slightly. Humans move on. We move on. We need to move on. We never stick on the same thing. You're weird if you stick on the same thing forever. And he knows this. He knows this better than anybody. Think of the wives that have forgiven his myriad affairs, the mistresses that have forgiven his myriad lies, the employers who have forgiven his myriad deceptions, the voters. They just forget. They move on. He said himself, of course, that the tactic is to throw up so much chaff, to commit so many gaffes, that critics don't even know where to start pulling it apart. Whether they do it deliberately, people like him and Trump, or whether it is just an intrinsic part, an unavoidable part, an inevitable part of their personality, I don't know. But it works, and that's what he's doing now. The point that Starmer made about Allegra Stratton and Matt Hancock and Neil Ferguson is uncontestable. That it is absolutely indefensible for him to accept the resignations of people who haven't actually been found by the relevant authorities to have broken the law, and not to resign himself when he is found to have broken exactly the same law. It was a breach of COVID regulations that prompted Matt Hancock and Neil Ferguson to resign. It wasn't even that prompted Allegra Stratton to resign. Allegra Stratton resigned for being the victim of a leak that revealed she had laughed about the fact that a party she didn't attend had happened. And he's now being busted for attending a party. So you've got two choices. Either you pretend it wasn't a party, which is what he's doing and his forelock tuggers are doing, or you resign. So he's right, Starmer, to go down that line. But I've been watching Johnson for a long time now. So long, in fact, that it's almost becoming boring pointing it out to you. He just sits there for as long as he can, blocking like a night watchman at the cricket. He's not hoping to hit any 4s or 6s for the time being. He's just hoping to keep blocking these googlies for as long as he needs to, until the news cycle moves on, until the world turns. And you're guilty of this as well, because I know that I am. It's very hard to keep your fires burning. It's very hard to keep a level of fury and outrage. I didn't lose anybody to COVID during lockdown, but if ever I find myself feeling a little fatigued by this appalling scenario, by these appalling antics, I do remember the funeral I had to attend of one of my closest, dearest friends, one of the greatest friends a man could ever have. I do remember the desiccated, diluted business of his funeral, because we all obeyed the rules. And when I hear people like Jacob Rees-Mogg talk of fluff, when I recall those moments, and when we hear Keir Starmer reporting yesterday the miseries and the horrors endured by grieving families, one grieving family in particular, to have people claim that is meaningless, or it shouldn't have a place in the discourse, or that somehow what we did during lockdown is not relevant to what the man who made the laws did. It's almost beyond belief. It's certainly beyond pathetic. But what he will do with the connivance of client media is just keep talking until it goes away. He'll just keep making these claims, however outrageous it may be. I was testing my eyesight when I drove a car, is the best example of what Johnson brings in, because it's the best example because it's not his own behaviour. It's what happens when you put a liar in charge. Everybody gets infected by it. And so that's where we are, in case you were wondering. And I don't know whether it will work this time. All I know is it's worked every other time. It's worked with his adulteries in his private life, and it's worked with his the lies and deceptions in his political life. He was supposed to be lying down in front of a bulldozer at Heathrow Airport. Do you remember that? To stop the new runway being built. That's what he promised the people of Uxbridge. So I don't know whether it will work this time, but I do know what he's doing. And what he's doing is talking absolute nonsense, horrific nonsense, in the knowledge that I'll just get my analogy absolutely bang on before I remember that this is supposed to be a phone-in show. What he's doing is waiting for the iceberg to melt. So he's heading towards the iceberg. He slams on the brakes and just waits for it to melt. It's not the best analogy, that, is it? What is it then? It's the size of our anger to diminish, because we've got other things to do. We've got bills to pay. We've got other things to worry about. I can't stay angry forever. If I stay angry forever, it starts making me poorly. I'm disgusted. I'm outraged. I'm horrified by what he's done, but I can't do that every day, because it will start chipping away at me. And that's what he does. That's what he banks on. And it works. So I don't know what I would do if I was Keir Starmer to keep those fires burning. But I do know that what Boris Johnson will do is just keep talking until the fires begin to die out, until we're down to embers. And when we're down to embers, and it's just the odd shock jock on the radio, or the odd Labour shadow minister, or the odd grieving widow that are still cross, then he'll be able to move on to the next disaster, whatever that turns out to be. 12:41 is the time. I don't really have a question for you, but if you want to have a go at the question of why Allegra Stratton, Matt Hancock and Neil Ferguson resigned, I'd love to hear your answer to that question, because Boris Johnson didn't answer it. Why did he accept the resignation of Allegra Stratton? Just answer me that question right now from any angle you want, and you'll get on before 12:45, I promise. 0345 60 60 973. Give me a quick analysis of PMQs if you want. Perhaps you think you could do a better job than Theo Usherwood. But what I really want is the question of this. Why did he accept Allegra Stratton's resignation? If he's done nothing that merits a resignation, what could she possibly have done that did? 0345 60 60 973. And if you don't fancy that, I'll do that thing I promised I'd do at the beginning. I need to thank whoever runs the Number 10 Cat Twitter account for this, because they, as far as I can tell, are the only only creatures who have kept the receipts. So here are some MPs going back to April the 12th who had comments to make about what they would do in the event, or what circumstances would see them lose support for Boris Johnson's premiership. So tomorrow they get to vote on whether we have an inquiry into whether or not he lied to the House of Commons. This is put together back in, well, about a week and a half ago. Lee Anderson, the MP for Ashfield, said, "Personally, I would not back anyone who has knowingly done wrong." Knowingly doing a lot of work there. That's why Johnson's defence hinges upon the idea that he didn't realise he was doing wrong when he did wrong. Duncan Baker, the MP for North Norfolk, said, "There are a great number of questions to answer, and while they hang over us, his tenure is questionable." Key question being, did he break the law? Answer now established, yes. Harriet Baldwin, the MP for West Worcestershire, she said that if the official report finds that the Prime Minister has lied to Parliament, then that is a red line for her. The official report, of course, doesn't necessarily look at whether or not the Prime Minister lied to Parliament, as Adam Wagner pointed out to us earlier, and therefore, presumably, given that the question of whether he lied to Parliament is so important to Harriet Baldwin, the MP for West Worcestershire, she will vote tomorrow for the Standards Committee to investigate. Karen Bradley, Staffordshire Moorlands, let's wait and see what happens. Well, we know he broke the law. What are you going to do? Elliot Coburn, the MP for Carshalton and Wallington. If I were the PM, I'd be considering my position, so he can only vote one way tomorrow. Stephen Crabb, Pressley in Pembrokeshire. He was right to apologise this week, but this may not be a sufficient response given the seriousness of these matters. Flick Drummond, Meehan Valley, has said that she will wait to see the results of the inquiry and the police investigations before commenting further. Well, we've seen the police investigations. He's guilty. What are you going to do tomorrow? Simon Fell, Barrow and Furness. Until the report or the findings of the Met investigation are completed, it's hard to draw a further conclusion. Well, we can draw that conclusion now, Simon Fell. He's guilty. What are you going to do? We need to make decisions. We need facts to make decisions and act. The fact is he broke the law. What are you going to do tomorrow when you have the opportunity to vote in favour of finding out whether or not he misled Parliament? Richard Graham, Gloucester, said that he would await the findings of the Gray report. Well, don't hold your breath. Adding, there are steps that every MP can take to bring about change. I do not rule out any of them in that situation. I'm going to go on in a minute. I'm just pointing out to you what happens when you wait. This is Johnson's tactic. He waits. So these are all his own MPs who weeks ago were not baying for his blood necessarily, but they were getting ready to do so. But he waited, and he obfuscated, and he denied, and he bloviated, and he lied. And this is what happens. Thankfully, the next one is Mark Harper, who hasn't buckled or allowed his flames to ebb. Speaking in the House of Commons, many have questioned, including some of my constituents, the Prime Minister's honesty and integrity and fitness to hold that office. Things are now worse than they were when he said that. Anthony Higginbottom in Burnley, I'm as angry and disappointed as you are. John Howell in Henley publicly said he won't comment during the ongoing police investigation. It's over, John. He's guilty. What are you going to do? Paul Howell, Sedgefield, Tony Blair's old constituency. In a democracy, nobody is above the law, and those who make the rules cannot retain credibility if they are found to have broken the rules themselves. Paul Howell's got to vote for this inquiry tomorrow, hasn't he? According to his own words. Tom Hunt, Ipswich. A line cannot be drawn under the current saga till the full report is published. Mark Logan, Bolton North East. The Prime Minister sets the culture and example for the rest of the country. He broke the law. What example and culture does that set? Hugh Merriman, Bexhill. If the Prime Minister doesn't shape up, then they have to ship out. Said before he was found to have broken the law. Kieran Mullen, Crewe and Nantwich. The fact that I haven't said he should resign does not mean that I accept or condone what has gone on or that I agree that he should carry on. It means I want to take a decision with the full facts. Well, then you've got to vote for the inquiry into whether or not he lied to the House of Commons. Otherwise, you're never going to have the full facts, Kieran Mullen. Daniel Poulter, Central Suffolk. If he faces criminal sanctions, then his position would be untenable. Again, I think that's probably negotiable. Criminal sanctions. He only gets a criminal record, as I understand it, if he appeals against the fixed penalty notice and loses. Angela Richardson, Guildford. It also seems as though there are further questions to which we do not yet have the answer because of the Metropolitan Police investigation. Well, the big question, Angela Richardson, did he break the law, has got an answer, and the answer is yes. Ben Spencer, Runnymede and Weybridge. Clearly, if it is found that the Prime Minister has intentionally misled Parliament or knowingly broke the law, his position would be untenable. You see? Intentionally and knowingly. That's why he's terrified of the investigation. Because he can claim he didn't know. He can claim it wasn't intentional. And you need to scrutinise and investigate that if you care about democracy. Derek Thomas, St Ives. If the inquiry or the Metropolitan Police find that the alleged activities were illegal and that the PM knew this or was involved, then I think he should consider his position. They have. He did. You should. Jeremy Wright, Kenilworth and Southern. This is a very serious situation and questions about the Prime Minister's ability to stay in office are legitimate. These quotes are compiled by politics_co_UK or politics. A very good little website, and there's a piece that they've put together that I'm going to retweet now so that you can have a look at it yourself. So there it is. And I say to you that when you defend a lie, you become a liar yourself. I didn't realise I was going to have such compelling evidence of that simple rule. At my fingertips before the close of play today.